Okay, let's go. So Jide, you can introduce yourself, and then Sandra will start this presentation. So you can go.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Jide Martins. I am CEO Comic Republic. I tell everyone that I'm a geek and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Okay, so Sandra, you can start your presentation.
Je m'appelle Sandra Federici, je suis journaliste et je dirige la revue Africa et Méditerranée, publiée en Italie. Et j'ai travaillé à partir de 1999 à de nombreux projets culturels concernant la BD d'auteurs africaine, dans le domaine de l'éducation, du développement et du dialogue interculturel. Et je ne vois pas ma présentation. Ah voilà, elle arrive peut-être. Voilà. Ok, comme vous ne voyez pas mon visage, je mets ici une photo de moi avec Barry Baruti, auteur le plus connu, auteur du Congo-Kinshasa, et on était à Angoulême ensemble. Et donc, je disais, j'ai travaillé de nombreux projets et avec les auteurs africains de bande dessinée et avec des associations d'auteurs et des maisons d'édition. On a réalisé des expositions à Bologne, à Dakar, à Bruxelles, au Centre belge de la bande dessinée et au Studio Museum in Harlem à New York. Et j'ai eu l'occasion de connaître beaucoup d'auteurs et de suivre leur parcours professionnel, et surtout dans la BD francophone. Alors, dans votre demande d'intervention, vous avez proposé, Clémence, un peu de questions. Alors, je me suis un peu interrogée sur cette question que vous avez posée. Et ma présentation a disparu, je la passe parce que je voulais vous montrer un peu des photos, d'images des comics africains que j'avais. Et donc, votre question, c'était un peu sur l'identité de la bande dessinée africaine. Ok, ici, par exemple, notre prix Afrique Méditerranée, qu'on a fait pour 6 éditions, c'était le prix panafricain plus important qu'il y avait à l'époque, des expositions, des catalogues. Ici, c'est un groupe de dessinateurs de l'année 2003 au Centre belge de la bande dessinée à Bruxelles, dans le temple de la bande dessinée. Et ça, c'est notre base de données qu'on a fait. C'est plus de 2000 items, des planches originelles d'une archive qu'on a à Bologne et qu'on a tout scannerisé, numérisé. Mais aussi, on a des fanzines très rares, des petits revues, beaucoup de documents de la bande dessinée à partir de la bande dessinée africaine à partir des années 80. Et alors, je disais, votre question, c'était un peu sur l'identité de la BD africaine et la bande dessinée, avec son statut d'art globalisé, c'est difficile de la enfermer dans des frontières des pays. Mais la BD africaine a eu un peu d'influence de la domination coloniale, mais aussi post-coloniale. Mais on a vu aussi que la plupart des auteurs de l'Afrique francophone, bien qu'ils se sont passionnés à la BD à partir des revues italiennes, je vais souligner cette lien avec l'Italie. Ce sont presque tous les auteurs avec lesquels j'ai fait des entretiens, auteurs nés dans les années 60-70, affirment s'être passionnés à la BD à travers la BD en petit format italien qui était publiée en France et qui arrivait en Afrique. Black Rock, Tex, Kinsdenbla. Mais avec et aussi bien sûr Tintin, la ligne claire franco-belge, les mangas japonais, plus tard les super-héros américains, Et avec toute cette influence, les auteurs se sont appropriés le 9e art et ont combiné les choix stylistiques et avec des genres très différents et ont utilisé la bande dessinée pour raconter l'Afrique. Ici, je vous montre l'exemple de Gorgorlou, l'une des bandes dessinées la plus connue du Sénégal. Gorgorlou, c'est l'homme moyenne sénégalaise. Attaqué et déflacté par les plans d'ajustement structurel, par le chômage. Et tous les jours, il sort de la maison et avec la débrouille quotidienne, il cherche quelque chose pour sa famille. Ici, c'est la bande dessinée populaire du Congo-Kinshasa. Fumueto, le fondateur de la bande dessinée populaire au Congo. Ça, ce sont des petits fanzines self-published. Mais aussi la génération des créateurs plus jeunes ne s'arrête pas face aux difficultés dues au manque, à la fragilité des industries culturelles d'Afrique francophone, parce que on connaît bien le manque de politique culturelle, qui n'a pas favorisé l'essor des structures culturelles locales autonomes, des écoles de dessin, des médias, des éditeurs, des librairies. Il y en a, mais il doit tout le temps travailler avec de grandes difficultés et il doit lutter. J'ai amené ici l'exemple de Agomedia, une maison d'édition du Togo, qui continue depuis 15 années à publier et avec des styles, des situations très différentes. Ici, on a les mythes et légendes africaines ou des choses comme un peu l'afrofuturisme, super albino, les super-héros. On a des autres exemples d'un type de publication faite par des associations d'auteurs qui, face au manque de structures, s'organisent, font des associations et font des autoproductions comme cette fanzine Waka Waka, que c'est très intéressant, publié au Cameroun, avec une grande différence de style et avec des auteurs pas seulement du Cameroun, mais aussi d'autres pays d'Afrique et aussi hors de l'Afrique. Par exemple, ici, il y a un auteur italien avec Pae, les grands auteurs humoristes du Gabon. Et un autre cas qui date de l'année 2000, fin des années 90, c'est la revue de Biche. Biche, en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est un cas de succès éditorial. C'était un petit groupe de BDistes qui se sont retrouvés dans les garages, comme ils racontent. Ils ont créé Biche, qui est maintenant un groupe éditorial en pleine expansion. Ils ont maintenant beaucoup de magasins et avec des dizaines de milliers de copies vendues chaque semaine. Bon, dans votre question, il y avait un peu qu'est-ce qu'on voit dans le cas du secteur numérique. Et j'ai pu suivre les auteurs africains du début de l'année 2000 jusqu'à maintenant, et les choses ont vraiment changé. Au début, c'était fait avec la poste. Quand on a fait les premières expositions, les premiers concours, les BD arrivaient sur papier avec des enveloppes. Et après, on a vu l'utilisation des scanners, la possibilité de faire circuler d'une manière gratuite les images. Après, les premiers blogs d'auteurs. Et après, avec les réseaux sociaux, la grande présence sur Facebook et Instagram. J'ai mis ici le cas et ça donne des possibilités aussi éditoriales. Didier Casaille du Centrafrique, il faisait la chronique de la crise des Bangui de la République centrafricaine, l'année 2012-2013, sur sa page Facebook. Et il faisait une chronique graphique, journalistique, et un éditeur l'a contacté pour lui demander un livre, un roman graphique, Tempête sur Bangui, qui raconte avec le format roman graphique toute l'histoire de la crise du Centrafrique, et c'est la boîte à boules. Donc à partir de la visibilité donnée avec la toile, on arrive aussi avec avoir des possibilités éditoriales. C'est Didier, il a créé ce nouveau style avec ses visages noirs, il a beaucoup évolué. Et une autre chose que je vois, c'est lié à cette chose que je viens de dire, c'est la bande dessinée comme possibilité de raconter l'actualité de l'Afrique. Aussi en Europe, maintenant en France, en Italie, avec la nouvelle bande dessinée, cette vague du roman graphique, du graphic novel et du graphic journalism, il y a vraiment un grand intérêt vers la bande dessinée comme moyen de raconter des histoires du passé et du présent. Et donc, je trouve que pour les auteurs africains, il y a vraiment une possibilité parce qu'il y a vraiment un intérêt à connaître les histoires de l'Afrique et l'actualité de l'Afrique. Je m'arrête et je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup Sandra pour cette présentation. C'était effectivement important qu'on en parle et qu'on fasse connaître ce projet. So now we will speak in English. I don't know if Jide and Bill are there.
I'm here.
In your opinion, are comics and manga the new mode of African identity expression for African youth? And maybe we can start with you, Jide.
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't say it's a new world. I would say that, comics and, in a broader prospect, using art to tell stories has been one of the most ancient art forms that Africans have deployed. But like everything else, in the world right now, there's a modern expression of it. So, yeah, it is emerging, but it's not new. It's a way that Africans have told stories from time.
Okay, thank you. And you, Bill, have you something to add?
I would say I think it comes in waves. It comes and goes. At least in Southern Africa, we talk about the first comics that were here, and because of the nature of colonization and loss of data and loss of archiving, it's known that comics existed before the 1980s. That's when Zimbabwe gained independence. And there was a very early resurgence of people creating comic books, maybe not so for money purposes, but for storytelling purposes. It's an easy medium to get into. You find people who want to make movies. Usually, if they can't find a full budget, the storyboards can be meshed into a graphic novel. And then because, of economic complications, there was a third resurgence, which happened around 2013. And that was around the time that other African countries were also entering this current era of comic books. You'll find that if you go back in Google, a lot of countries were coming out with this is the first African superhero, be it Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and so on and so forth. So I think events like this are important so that we can archive that information and it becomes a staple storytelling tool.
Okay, thank you. And I just forgot, but Bill, you didn't introduce yourself. Maybe you can go.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Complications with technology. Hi, everyone. Thank you, fellow speakers and everyone who's in the room. My name is Bill Masuku. I'm a comic book artist and writer from Zimbabwe. I'm the creator of Captain South Africa, Razor Man, Welcome to Dead World, and I'm the author of the Misfortunism series. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Bill.
So, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of this industry?
Bill, do you want to take that first?
I just rambled for a bit. Jide, please take this one.
Okay, so let me first start with the strengths. The strengths are that the industry right now is a quick medium to express one's self, to tell our stories, and for us to be able to, like Bill said earlier, document our history. We have a lot of talented artists and people and creatives on the continent. And using comic books has provided an avenue for them to come out and show the world their skills, show the world what Africa is really like, and start to correct some of the misrepresentation that Africa has in general. And it is growing, especially in a world today where the Western market, when it comes to entertainment, is getting really bored of what they're used to. They're oversaturated with their kind of content. Africa becomes a new field where we can discover new content. So that makes the comic industry and the storytelling industry of Africa as a whole, because we can't look at comic making, we can't isolate comic making from the rest of, I like to call it the storytelling industry, and in a broader sense, the entertainment industry. We can't separate them; they have to be interdependent. Now, those are our strengths. It's untapped, it's emerging, and we have a huge pool of talents to draw from. Now, the weaknesses is that we don't have a lot of investments in terms of human resources, people training and becoming professionals in the field. We don't have a lot of investments in terms of capacity, the different aspects of actually making it into a strong industry that can compete in an ever, how will I put it, coming together world. And the shakers and the movers, meaning people who create policy, people in the finance industry and the business industry, haven't started looking inwards. Most of our focus is still coming externally. I believe that is our biggest weakness.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Bill, you can go now. Or...
Yeah, I think definitely just piggybacking off Jide. One of those strengths is, like he said, being able to tell our own narrative. And one thing that's definitely apparent just across industries, animation, comic books, even light novels, is that Japan has really taken ownership of the way that they tell stories. So much so that people will have arguments over what animation is and what anime is. And the nuances of the production culture, the way it's made, and the way people receive it and the cultures behind it. I think if we are able to tell African stories and tell stories by Africans, we'll start to move in ways that have been unprecedented so far in terms of industry standard. And you'll find that people will now create a new word for anime, comics, manga, specifically made for African by African, and what that feels like. And I definitely think that's a big plus. The immediate downside that I see, the weakness I see is disunion, if I can say that. Because there's 50 plus African countries, I think everyone is vying for the strongest voice. I think Nigeria definitely has the biggest, loudest voice right now. South Africa coming second, and other countries trailing behind. And those two countries will set the standard for taste because they have the closest access to overseas audiences, and that might force other smaller countries to fit into that mold in order to be seen as quality or standard.
Thank you. Maybe Sandra, you want to add something?
Yes, I think that the problem, the strengths are the capacity of the author, but they need to confront themselves with other authors. When I see to the most successful authors that I know, I see that there are them that are able to research all the time to see what the other authors do in other countries, in Europe, in America, in ambience. And the problem, I think, is the cultural industry that in Francophone Africa, I'm speaking about that, are really weak. The publisher have no money for investment. There are no bookshop. You can find comics on the street or second-hand comic, or in some little bookshop. There are very few. So this is a problem, and for that there are the embassy, for example, French embassy, Belgian embassy, Institut Culturel, that organize festival because there is not a cultural politics from the state to finance cultural events, so it's very difficult for the publisher. I think first of all it's necessary to finance to sustain the publishing houses, because this is the basis of for the comics, to publish on paper or digital comics. Is good to have, is necessary to have a publisher, publishing house.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Sandra has just talked about. There are a lot of companies who are doing extremely well, but this is because they have infrastructure. For example, you can't have Microsoft or Google, for example, if you don't have good internet infrastructure. You have companies like Amazon now taking projects to space because Amazon has built on existing infrastructure, either from the government or have put into place them, people like the government or publishing our houses to actually go out and actually put some infrastructure in place. The comic creators themselves, like I am, and many other comic creators in Africa, have started creating internal structure and internal capacity. That being us being able to create quality comics that will be able to meet international standards. But what is now necessary in terms of infrastructure is very good marketing outlets, which, to be honest, can only be done by people in those sectors, meaning publishers coming out to say, okay, we want to take or make an investment in publishing already created comics or printing and distributing in bookstores. There are a number of bookstores. I keep hearing people saying there are no bookstores. There are bookstores in places like Nigeria, but none of the publishers are coming out to say, okay, we want to print this book and distribute after what the creators have made.
Okay, thank you. Next question. There is a question for you, I think, in the chat, is why are Nigerian comics not distributed in French or Arabic-speaking Africa? Is it a question of language or of opportunity?
I would say that it's a little bit of both. One, yes, is language. For example, in my company, Comic Republic, we have a staff who is from Congo, who speaks fluent French, but doesn't write fluent French. And we release a comic every 2 weeks. So if we had more people who were willing to work in the industry who could translate our books to French, yes, definitely you would have a lot more French-speaking comics. And it's the same also with the type of content we create. We don't have, or we're not in touch with a lot of French-speaking people who can read and write French fluently. Also, that we'll be able to translate our comics to French in proper standards, meaning, anybody reading it in French will not find grammatical errors or us making mistakes in terms of translating from English to French. That's one thing. The other thing is opportunity. Of course, already, as I said earlier, African creators are building capacity themselves. we don't have any support, and that's the truth. The stakeholders, and I'm talking about policymakers, people already in the finance industry, or people who have money to invest, are not looking at the sector, which is pretty strange to me because worldwide, the comic industry has become $1 billion business. And hence, that affects the opportunity because for us to get people to translate it to other languages, for example, Arabic or French, and if there's a market there, which I'm sure there is, because comics have become a global phenomenon, we would um, invest in translating. But right now, most African creators are still putting all of their capacity to even just keep the lights on and ensure that we have content, even if it's just in their native language or in English.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So my next question is more about theme and subject. And this is also one of the questions of Mohamed in the chat about what are the most theme subject there in comics, and why do you often choose futuristic universe? Is it to escape from today reality and open up to a better future?
Well, I wouldn't say, funny enough, I wouldn't say that we always choose a futuristic universe, to be honest. For example, in Comic Republic, a lot of our stories are based on either present day or, historical moments or myth or legend. So it is a bit of the other side. And I believe that is so for most African comics. We really don't do a lot of Afrofuturism. We do focus a lot more on the past, which is even something that I'm hoping that we can change. That doesn't mean that we don't have Afrofuturistic comics. We do, but I can almost say for the whole industry that we're focused 90% more on history and present day and the future. Bill, could you, what's your thought on that?
I have lots of thoughts on this one. Just to piggyback off your last note on translating to French and Arabic, I think we've had a conversation before just talking about it's very difficult. It's a very moral difficult choice to translate into French and Arabic before you translate into a local language. And it, like if you have Guardian Prime from Comic Republic and it's in English and French but not Yoruba or Yoruba, and all the other languages that are available. Yes, there's many, but not giving them access, not giving local access before you give international access. It's a difficult balancing act, and sometimes the data doesn't support either choice. In terms of Afrofuturism, I think a lot of people use the words Afro and future together and apart in a way that sometimes confuses the definitions of all three words, like Africa, Afrofuturism, Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is a mainly an American terminology, and I think a lot of the time we use it to be able to tap into that market and tap into people who are looking for African comics, but that's the kind of terminology that they resonate with. For an example, historically Black colleges in the United States are there for a reason. There are particular causes to, equalize the gap between education in different races. But in Africa, it would be weird to have historically Black colleges because we are historically Black, like the individual nations. But in terms of actually making stories about better futures and setting it in alternate realities and different planets, I think for a long time fiction has excluded Black bodies, Black people, people of color, and I think some of our heavy load is to reverse. I think Jide had mentioned it earlier, to reverse that narrative, to say that yes, we can have someone with an afro in space. We can have someone with dark skin and braids in space who's very competent, who's not there for comedy, who's technically adept and have a depth of character that isn't founded in just their race. There's lots of conversations in and around the topic, and thank you for bringing it up. Yes, for better futures, I definitely agree on that. Just overall.
Yes, I think that this is the moment for have more black bodies, as we say before, in the art and cinema and comics. In Italy now, after Black Lives Matter movement, we have really a lot of artists, Afro-descendant, black artists, Italian people, but there are some of migrants there that do art, visual contemporary art and video cinema with stories based on the Italian history, where black people were agents. For example, the last one is about Alessandro de' Medici, that was a chief in Florence, and in the 500 years ago, and he was a black man. So I think that also for the African comics author, there is a good moment now. I just want to say that.
Thank you. So there is another question who made in the chat is, when will we have American heroes that will highlight the richness of the whole continent and not only of one territory? Why not imagine a group of superheroes representing and coming from several African regions, the African Avengers? Maybe Bill or Jide, you want to go?
Yeah, I can go first on that one.
I knew it. Jide, please go ahead.
A publisher have to decide that if you want to publish it.
No, for us, to be honest, it's again interest. There's something I've always said, that we can't build capacity if we don't have people interested in the field, right? Reason why, for example, Comic Republic is heavy on Nigerian heroes is simply because 90% of my team are Nigerians, right? We started out with one motto at Comic Republic. We said we don't want to be an African comic company. We want to be a comic company that happens to be African, telling the stories of icons and superheroes from an African perspective. Now, the truth is we're ready to collaborate with creators from any part of Africa, if they are creators from any part of Africa. A lot of people ask us, publishers and people who are in the creative space, why don't you do this? Truth is, if we don't know how to do it, we cannot. I am not going to come and write a story about a hero from Zimbabwe if I don't understand the history, the culture of the Zimbabwe people. Even I'm hoping that I'm saying that correctly. And it's the same thing with South Africa or any other part of Africa. So if we do get content creators who are ready to create quality content from other regions of Africa, and again, what is important is quality content, because we get a lot of content that isn't standard or cannot stand in the international market made by African creators. And the reason is that, well, it is Africa, which is another thing that we're trying to battle. We don't want mediocre work. We want work that anybody around the world will see and would be interested in seeing. It's one of the major things that we're bothered about in Comic Republic. So to answer the question directly, yes, we are interested and we are trying to create quote and unquote African Avengers. We even have a comic series right now that is called The Vanguard, right? And I'm hoping that my assistant will put a link to the comic series in the chat box so that you can see what it is. Our heroes have started going to different cultures to fight gods from other regions. People like Zeus, people like Thor, and other pantheon from other regions. We want to be all inclusive of Africa, but we need other African creatives to collaborate with us in order for us to have originality in our storytelling.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Bill, you can react now.
Yes. So I definitely agree with everything that Jide said. There's not just narrative boundaries in terms of there are 50 something, 54, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I am wrong. There's about 54 African countries, and each of them have unique language sets, cultures, political agendas, and so on and so forth. And I think even trying to address the melting pot that is this continent is very difficult. And I think a lot of the time, African creatives have the burden of the rest of the continent's narrative storytelling. When we talk about bande dessinée from France, um, that's in the European region, and we don't lump in Germany, Italy, and so on and so forth. I mean, Brexit is a big example of nations trying to establish themselves, and whether it works, that's for the future to decide. Even in thinking about when we talk about America and the West, we're usually making reference to the United States of America, not Canada and its neighboring countries, which really pulls away from the stories being told and who is telling those stories. Um, I think I think every African creator has had the notion or the dream of creating an African Avengers. Um, it's just there. We all read Avengers books and we get excited and say we should have a team that really builds together. But there's a line that I wrote in the current Captain South Africa that I'm writing, which is effectively you are arrogant enough to call yourself the captain of a whole country. Um, for for a lot of writing purposes, it's very difficult to imagine how big Africa is sometimes. If there's an emergency in Nigeria, that's that's like an 8 to 9 hour flight. I would never get there in time. Like if I was an Avenger, and they really understate how big the continent is, and the I think in even in one of Jide's books, there's a hero who wants to intervene in something that happens in America, and they block him because of visa restrictions, and that's a real thing. But in real life, I think the international African trade agreement is definitely going to change the way people look at this question. This is definitely a question that's ongoing, and the answer will change over time. So thank you so much for that question. I'm going to take down the comment now.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, you want to add something, or I go to the next question?
Okay.
Okay. So next question is more about digital technology, and how do you see the contributions of digital technology in your industry?
Oh, I mean, I don't think I can comment or talk about the advantages that the digital sphere has brought to the comic industry. Comic Republic as a business is 90% digital than more of a brick and mortar type of business. Um, we're optimized for digital platforms, both desktop, mobile. The formats in which we create our comics are also optimized for digital platform. We do all our research and development in the digital space. We do printed comics strictly by order, and that lets you see that for us it's an option and not the main. The digital sphere has been able, or digital field or platforms have been able to give us what our government, society, and infrastructure have failed for centuries to do, which is make it easy for us to distribute and provide our stories to a large number of people over a short period of time. Um, because we distribute on either our apps, progressive web apps, or websites, we're able to reach. Presently, we have an audience of slightly over, and a monthly audience of slightly over 1.5 million views. And this is simply because we're going digital, something I'm not sure we would have been able to achieve if we did not have digital platforms. So yes, and even going to the way we create, as a business, all our artists have moved away from traditional platforms, and we're all using one form of digital software to create our art. which I would say is the universal standard around the world. It's making it faster for us to produce comics, easier for us to edit, and easy for us to improve on the quality of our work. So I could go on and on about the advantages of the digital age and digital platform, but yes, the digital age has provided a lot of advantages to storytelling, and I strongly believe has helped improve and distribute the African and Nigerian comic industry to the world in general.
Okay, thank you. Jide, Sandra, you want to add something or not, because we are short in time? I have at least maybe one last question.
Just very quickly, I wanted to add on Jide's point. In terms of knowing those numbers of your viewers, even something as simple as Instagram tells you your insights, when people are seeing your posts, what country they're from, their demographics. Before this age of technology, you would rely on sales, and sometimes you would wholesale to bookstores and you wouldn't get those figures back. You'd find books either returned. It was a big problem in the United States, where books were returned or not used, or they had to change the books in order to resell them secondhand. With the digital revolution, you find that you have immediate access to your audience, and I think that's a huge bonus.
For me too, digitalization is a big occasion to overcome the difficulties to distribute, to print in Africa the comics book and to distribute it, to sell it. But I think at the basis, we need the authors need a strong publisher, as Comic Republic is. A publishing house is necessary to make a good job and a successful job.
Okay, thank you. So one last question really quickly is, how do you see the future of your sector? Are you optimistic, and why?
Yes, the future of the sector is actually very, very bright right now. I know this because as a business, and that's Comic Republic, we've been expanding in terms of, getting offers from different sectors, especially from overseas. And even in Nigeria, in Africa, we're also getting people who want to invest actual physical cash or and resources into building the industry. There's a lot of potential for us to turn our content into big TV shows, or even just content that people can now watch on their screens. And increasingly, we're under pressure to, provide more content for a much wider audience. So yes, the industry does have a bright future. It's getting bigger, and the sky is our limit.
Thank you. Bill, maybe you can go.
I think we are currently in the pioneering stage of comic books. We're still very early, very young. People are just figuring out how to mine, and we're still figuring out what kind of tools to use and the quality content. We find breakout stars, yes, but we are not yet at the place where we are at the peak. This is just people figuring it out and finding out about it right now, and that is inspiring and amazing. So thank you for everyone who came to this talk. Really appreciate you. You matter.
Thank you too. Sandra, you want to add the last word, maybe?
Yes, as far as the Francophone countries are concerned, I am a little bit pessimistic regards cultural industries because they are very weak. But I am optimistic for the narrative talent of some authors who can well fit into the current of graphic journalism and graphic novel, as I said before. And thank you for this interesting panel.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you all of you for your talk, your answer, and it was really interesting. So we will go to the next conference. Thank you again. See you.